Hi, everybody. Alan Arnett here with another podcast on the blog of alanarnett.com. It is Friday, October the 11th, 2024, and this is a continuation of the series on the seven summits. And today we're going to talk about one of the most remote and personally, I think one of the most outstanding of the seven or eight or nine, depending upon how we count it, of the seven summits, and that's Mount Vinson in Antarctica. But before we get there, some breaking news. I just want to quickly acknowledge that a team from National Geographic that was planning to ski the Hornbeam Couloir on the Tibet side of Everest have found an astounding discovery of supposedly the foot of Sandy Irvine of Mallory and Irvine fame. I think we all know that are aficionados of mountain climbing the story of Mallory and Irvine, that they were climbing the mountain in 1924 and they disappeared somewhere around the second step, and that's where they were last seen. And so the mystery was, did they die going up or did they die going down, because they were never seen again? And in 1999, Conrad Anker, with a team led by Eric Simonson of International Mountain Guides, found Mallory's body right below the fall line from the second step, but Sandy Irvine's body has never been found. There's a lot of speculation about what happened to Irvine's body. The primary one that's gotten the most traction was that the Chinese found his body decades ago, along with the infamous Kodak camera, and they took it and hid it, and then they never revealed to the world what was on the contents of the camera, because they wanted to maintain their notoriety of being the first to summit Mount Everest from the Chinese side by Chinese climbers and Tibetan climbers. Well, that's speculation, and not sure if all that's going to go to rest in terms of whether they summited or not. But certainly it puts to rest that the Chinese found his body, because on this ski team, Jimmy Chin, along with climbers Eric Ropik and Mark Fisher, who were along as photographers, they found a they found a leather boot encompassing a foot with a sock on it, and on the sock it had a label that read AC Irvine. So they're going to do DNA analysis. They've gotten permission from the ancestors of Sandy Irvine back in the UK to get DNA samples and compare it to have a positive verification. So we'll see. But it still doesn't put to rest the mystery, the whole allure of whether they summited or not. I don't think the camera is going to be found. If it is found, I seriously doubt that the film will still be intact after 100 years, after going through being up on that side of the mountain, being exposed in the glacier, and obviously the turmoil that takes place with a moving mountain with avalanches and glaciers and crushing rock. So, but it is exciting, and I hope it brings a modicum of closure to the Irvine family and I guess now it'd be like two or three generations past him, for closure of what maybe did happen to their loved one. Okay, so moving on, Mount Vinson. I tell you what, Mount Vinson, it was just an incredible experience for me. It was one of the seven summits that I climbed between December 2010 and September of 2011. It was actually the first of my seven summits, and I summited it on December 9th in 2010. People always ask me, what's my favorite climb? I've done about 38 major climbs. And so I always have to ask to put Everest and K2 aside. Look, I grew up in Memphis, Tennessee, elevation 330 feet. I camped as Boy Scouts in kudzu fields in northern Mississippi. I never, ever dreamed about going to the mountains, but I did. And I'm forever grateful, because I think it changed my life. I know it changed my life for the better, and hopefully made me a better version of myself. But doing the seven summits, that was really interesting. And Vinson is right up there along with Carson's Pyramid for being two of the most difficult logistically to reach, and also two of the most expensive, along with Everest. So the way that Vinson is the highest mountain on the Antarctic continent, The Antarctic continent is really a dry place. They don't get a lot of snow, but the temperatures are just horrendous. They can be minus 40 Fahrenheit, and centigrade is about the same of the scale. But it's really the winds. It's really a windy continent, and that's what gets you climbing it. But I'll tell you what, it's some of the most fun I've ever had. It all starts off with you fly down to Puntas Arenas in Chile, and I apologize to the Chileans for butchering the name of the town, but that's what I do. And so you fly down there, you meet up the rest of your team, and then you attend a briefing by Antarctic Logistics and Expeditions, ALE. ALE operates under a concession by the Antarctic Treaty Association. So they manage the entire tourism, if you will, on the continent. So if you're going to visit the South Pole, or you're going to do a scientific research expedition, or you're going to do, climbing any mountain, be it Tyree, the second highest, or Vinson, the highest, then really you're going to go through ALE. And they've established a blue ice runway at Union Station, Union Glacier, on the glacier. And it's really an amazing place. When I flew in, we flew in on a Russian Ilyushin 76 cargo jet, which was just a trick because you're sitting in this thing. It's the front part of it are all coach seats. You've got a Russian crew. They could work on their people skills a little bit because I felt like it was something out of the Hunt of Red October. But there are a couple of flight attendants along the way. They give you, cotton for your ears and a juice box and a little sack lunch, and that's about it. So you don't expect much on this long flight. I think it was around 4 or 5 hours. But back in the back of this huge cargo plane could be anything from tractors to tents to toilets. Who knows what's going to be back there? But anyway, these days it's a little more civilized. ALE has chartered a 757 twin engine airplane outfitted with all business class seats. So no cargo, just a bunch of stinky climbers in there, and all sitting there, and they're outfitted in their clothing to go down to the glacier. It used to be that you would wear actual expedition clothing because if the plane did crash on the way down, then you were going to be in the middle of the Antarctic continent, and you wanted to have the proper gear to do that. It's probably they probably lightened up a little bit on that requirement these days. If anyone knows, I'd love to know what the latest is. In terms of the difficulty of climbing it, like I said, there's not a lot of technical climbing. I consider Vinson to be like a little Denali. It's what is it, 4,000 feet shorter, but by the same time, it's got that same snow and ice, and that you're pulling a sled 40 to 50 pounds, and you've got a 40 to 50 pound backpack on. And so there's 3 camps on the main route, the so-called normal route. There's lots of different routes on Vinson, but really there's one that 99% of all the commercial expeditions take. It's really the true explorers that go on the other side and try to climb the new routes and things like that. But there's three camps. There's 3 camps. There's Vinson Base Camp at around 7,000 feet, and then there's a low camp and a high camp, and then you've got the summit at 16,000. Starts off with, once you fly into Union Glacier, you'll spend anywhere from an hour to a week waiting for the weather to clear up. And then you'll hop on another airplane, a little puddle jumper, a Twin Otter or a Basler, and you'll take that's about an hour flight. Phenomenal flight. Looking out the window, seeing all these mountains, snow-covered mountains. You can't tell the difference between where the sky starts and the snow begins as you look out there. It's just incredible. But eventually you end up at Vinson Base Camp, and there you settle in. Most people spend the night there before they make the first trek up to the low camp. One of the highlights, though, is that you'll love this, that it has one of the best views from the toilet I've ever seen in this world. I think the second best that I've ever seen is from climbing the Grand Teton at the high camp there, where you're sitting in the toilet looking out over the landscape. But in this case, you're on the toilet and you're looking out over, again, endless ice and snow, and the sky is just a color blue that you just can't imagine. So anyway, so you end up making the trek then to pull your sled and you haul your backpack to the low camp, and there you typically stay for again, it could be one night, it could be a week, depending upon the weather. Some teams will just do a carry and then they'll leave their gear there and go back to Vinson Vinson Base Camp and then move up the next day permanently. Most teams will actually just go ahead and make one journey of it. It's not too far. It's about 6 miles, and you gain what do you gain uh, about 3,000 feet, something like that. So it's not too hard of a day. You're moving along, typically hard packed snow. You get into a rhythm. A lot of people will ski until they do cross country skiing in that style or AT skiing on this entire area. And that's become really, really popular. I'm not a good enough skier. I could never do it, even doing something like that. But anyway, so you get to low camp and you spend a few days. The first order of business, though, is that you've got to build walls around the tent because those winds can come up and literally just rip your tent apart and shred it into pieces. Typically, they'll set up an igloo and dig a little trench to and serve as a cooking tent, and that becomes kind of the dining tent and the social area in case you do get stuck. We were stuck there for about 4 days, waiting for the weather to clear up on the high camp and on the summit. Eventually, it does, and then you move to the next part, which could be the most kind of the crux, if you want to call it that. You go from the low camp, like I said, around 9,000 to the high camp about 12,000, so about 3,000 feet vertical gain. Takes about 5 hours to go from low camp to high camp, and you go up a head wall similar to what you have above the 14,000 foot camp on Denali. It's not too bad. It's about 30, 40 degrees. It's maybe, I don't know, maybe 1,000 feet, but it's enough to get your heart rate going as you gain the altitude and you're moving up. You've ditched the sled back in the camp, low camp. So now all you have is, basically your necessary summit gear and sleeping bag and perhaps a tent to set up at the high camp. There's not one there already. And then so you get to high camp, and again, you settle in. Most people will settle in for the night and get up the next morning. Remember, the sun doesn't set at this time of year in Antarctica, so you're pretty well allowed to climb just about whatever you want to. And so then you head off and you do the 14-hour round trip to get to the top of the continent, to the top of the Vinson Massif. It's just a fantastic view. Again, a feast for the eyes. You're surrounded by high mountains and just all covered in snow and ice and little black dots of rocks sticking out here and there. There's no airplane contrails flying over. You look up at the sky and it's this blue azure that I've never seen in my life. It's just this color blue, which is so pristine and so transparent. It just causes you to wonder really what you're seeing and if your eyes are playing tricks on you. Eventually, you'll get to the base of the Massif, the true summit. And you got a couple of choices. You can go to east or west. We went up the west side, which is a little bit steeper. We traveled roped up and using ice axes, crampons, just, one step into the ice after another after the snow, hearing the crunch. And eventually you can't go any higher. We get to the top and you get up to the very top of it, take your hero shot with your ice axe and looking out all over Antarctica. And you take a 360-degree view. And again, the color of the sky, just the pristine nature, the purity of the continent is just impressive. And it causes us to really wonder why we do to our planet what we do. And that's the reason that ALE has the concession and the monopoly, because they manage the tourism in Antarctica very, very tightly. They 100% adhere to the leave no trace policy. All human solid waste, all waste of any candy bar wrapper, jug, anything is taken off the continent at the end of the season and flown back to Punta Arenas for proper disposal. The only thing left on the continent would be liquid human waste, and that's typically a big hole, so it goes down. I don't know where it goes somewhere. But nonetheless, it's still a very clean environment, and there's really no traces of humans once they close up camp, except down at the South Pole, where this, I think, is permanently staffed. But, standing on the summit, it really was a reward. For me, it was fantastic to get my first summit. By the way, I did it with International Mountain Guides and Phil Urschler. Phil had been down to Vinson. I don't know what the number was, 20, 30, 40 times. And this was going to be his last time. And he came along because this was the beginning of my 7 summits. I climbed many of them with IMG. And so having Phil along, the legendary Phil Urschler, and talking to him about his first ascent of Everest and going up with his wife later on was just a real treat. You know, that's a lot of times that's what makes these trips so special. Obviously, the climbing, being in these remote places is just incredibly inspiring. But it's the people and it's the camaraderie of the your teammates and what you see out there. So, yeah, hopefully now you can see why I say that Vincent is one of my favorites. It's so unique. And yeah, it's expensive. It's about, in the mid $50,000 range, but it's a trip of a lifetime. And if you ever get a chance to go, I'd highly recommend it. All right. Climb on. This is Alan. And remember, memory's everything.